Tea in a Bar, Chapter 2. What Teens Do Best. Chapter Summary. Midoriya continues to confuse a bar full of villains while enjoying Kurogiri's tea. Despite being villains or people who have done questionable things, none of them particularly liked the look they saw on Midoriya's face when he answered Twice's question. There was a sort of resignation in the kid's face that didn't fit with the image they had of him in their minds. For Shigaraki and Kurogiri, it felt wrong to see it on his face because they had only seen bright eyes and a fierce determination. They remembered how he looked in the heat of battle at the USJ attack, but that look wasn't there. Instead, the hero brat looked as if he didn't care about what would happen to him at that moment. It crossed Shigaraki's mind that if someone else were in danger, that Midoriya's face would look different. Meanwhile, for Kambra, Spinner, Magne, Toga, and Dobby, the look on Midoriya's face wasn't anything that they were expecting to see. They had all seen snippets of Midoriya from the sports festival. They saw the power that he inflicted with just one flick of a finger. When Midoriya had been warped, they had expected a fight with a UA student full of energy and righteousness. But they hadn't gotten that at all. Instead, they watched as the hero student that had fought Shigaraki and Kurogiri greet them like they were old buddies, then went and used the kitchen in the back to heat up their soup. Why the kids even had soup or was buying it so late was another question. None of them even knew that the bar has something other than alcohol and maybe water until Midoriya had asked Kurogiri for tea. Shigaraki didn't have an answer to explain Midoriya's behavior either. They saw the look of confusion on his face when Midoriya essentially trash-talked about All Might. None of the information he gave was actually going to be useful in the takedown of any heroes, unless they somehow defeated All Might with spicy foods, which didn't seem likely. Everything that came out of Midoriya's mouth threw them for a loop, and they were confused, and when Shigaraki had said that Midoriya was All Might's successor, that his sensei had told him so, the others knew that Sensei was Shigaraki's boss and that the man was not meant to be messed with. But Midoriya comfortably told them that he was not planning to be the next symbol of peace, which any successor of All Might would be. How Shigaraki Sensei could be wrong, they didn't know. They left it alone, though, as Spinner asked more about All Might, and Midoriya went on a whole explanation as how the number run was someone that should not be teaching at all. Even though the kid said a lot, they had a feeling that he might have been holding back. They would be right in thinking that. The villains weren't at all ready for him to answer their questions with brutal honesty. They sure as hell weren't ready for Midoriya to tell them that he thought it was fine to tell them his opinions because they would actually listen and not hurt him. They weren't ready for him to talk about being hurt by others like it was nothing. And Twice asked him the question that was on everybody's minds. Are you okay, kid? They saw Midoriya smile as if the question that Twice asked was something funny. Nope, he said before taking another sip of tea. The bar was oddly quiet for those few seconds after hearing that one word. Various thoughts ran rampant in everybody's mind. What was wrong with this kid? Why does he look so tired? How can he be so calm right now? Why hasn't he fought back? These were the things they were going over in their heads before they were interrupted by Toga's voice. Oh, Izuku-kun, if you're sad, do you want a hug? Do you want to stab someone? That always makes me feel better. Thanks for the offer, Toga, Midoriya said, seemingly not bothered by the nickname or the brutal offer. But I don't think stabbing someone will help me feel better, and I don't think a hug would be the safest option since you might stab me, and it would be uncomfortable for anyone to hug me. Midoriya looked around at everyone as if showing Toga that no one was offering to hug him, and no one was. They were just standing up there awkwardly as they saw Toga pout and look at them with a familiar glint in her eye that made them feel the need to watch out for knives that may start coming their way. After a couple of seconds, they heard Midoriya burst out into laughter. It sounded genuine despite the boy's appearance. Don't worry, I don't expect any of you to actually hug me to make me feel better, he smiled. Pretty sure that's the last thing you want to do, although. He turned to Kurogiri. I'm almost finished with this tea. Do you mind making me another? That's no issue at all, Kurogiri responded. Thanks. Shigaraki had gone to the corner with a pensive look on his face while the others started to have a conversation. Kurogiri, meanwhile, was making Midoriya's second cup of tea, still in a way that made the Misty Man look like he was happy to make it. Midoriya even seemed to be enjoying watching the warp villain make it. At some point, they all saw Midoriya take out the notebook that had been in the grocery bag. When Toga had went over to Midoriya, who effectively dodged the knife she threw, she saw the beginnings of a sketch of the teacup Midoriya drank out of earlier. It's so pretty, Izuku-kun. I didn't know you could draw. Izuku smiled a sad smile. Thanks, Toga. I used to draw a lot, but haven't been able to for a while. I'm glad to see that the drawing isn't horrible, even if the lines are a little shaky. Toga frowned at the words Midoriya was saying, and she looked at Midoriya's hands. She could see his fingers were a little crooked and the scars. She suddenly remembered how in the sports festival it looked like Midoriya had broken his fingers multiple times against Todoroki. Before Midoriya could see Toga's frown, she smiled and leaned against him, making him chuckle. Well, I still think it looks pretty, Izuku-kun. Can you draw me something later? Sure, Toga. Toga squealed in delight when Midoriya agreed, and she jumped before running over to Dabi, who had been watching the scene with a careful eye. What was that all about, Toga? The flame user asked. Dabi watched the smile on Toga's face disappear and was instead replaced with something a bit more serious. I think Izuku-kun is hurting, she pouted. Dabi snorted. I think that's much as obvious, Toga. The damn kid said he was okay. Any kind of confusing, to be honest. Dabi looked over to the hero student who was sitting on the bar doing something in his notebook. His attention was brought back to Toga when the girl poked him. I know that. He's hurting in another way, though, and it isn't fair. I haven't even gotten a chance to cut him, and he's hurting. What other way are you talking about? He tested where Toga grabbed his hand, and the girl ran a finger along where his bones were. His hands, Dabi, she said softly. Before she could say more, Twice was pulling her away to talk to Compress. Dabi looked at his hands and felt the phantom sensation of Toga's running a fingernail along his skin. It was odd. Usually he had to avoid knives trying to cut or stab, but instead Toga had been gentle, and the way she spoke without the usual manic tone, she had spoken calmly and softly. He looked back at Midoriya. The damn kid was confusing him. Nothing was making sense since Kurogiri had warped him to the bar, and now Toga was acting weird talking about the kid's hands. Why would the kid's hands hurt? The conversation that Twice had dragged Toga into somehow became a lecture from Compress about the art of magic. Everyone was perfectly fine to hear the man speak about it, occasionally having Twice add on since the man also knew about magic, and for some reason Midoriya was knowledgeable about magic as well, and he absentmindedly joined the conversation. I think one of the special parts about magic tricks is the idea of something impossible being done in the mystery. It's nice to imagine things like that. It adds something to the normal world people live in, even if it's just for a moment, Midoriya had said. No one said anything except for Compress. Wonderfully said, Midoriya. It pleases me to see such acknowledgement from someone so young. Midoriya sent the masked man a smile before turning around to drink the freshly brewed tea Kurogiri set down. They all watched him as Midoriya closed his eyes for a few moments while holding the teacup in his hands. Kurogiri, who had the clearest view of Midoriya's face, was surprised to see such a reaction to someone drinking something he had served them, and he felt the odd urge to pat Midoriya's head. The boy just looked so tired. Despite this, the conversation continued and changed topics to types of knives. Toga was the most enthusiastic when this topic came up, although at some point in the conversation they were interrupted by the ringing of a phone. Everyone's heads whipped around to look at Midoriya, who took the phone out from his pocket and answered it in a fluid and quick movement. Everyone in the bar seemed to freeze and just stare at Midoriya as the boy greeted the person on the call. "Oh, hey, Mom," Midoriya said casually, as if he didn't have a room full of villains looking at him with wide eyes. They could all hear a woman's voice asking Midoriya where he was and telling him that it was late. The woman had apparently never gotten a notification from their security system that Midoriya had gone home that night. "Oh, one of my friends needed help with something, so I went to their place and lost track of time. I think I'll have to stay here since it's so late," Midoriya said in a cheery tone that didn't match how he sounded earlier. They watched as the boy listened to his mother with a sullen expression on his face. It seemed that his mother had a lot to say, as Midoriya didn't really speak much until a few moments later. "Yeah, I got the money you left. I'll be fine. See you when you come back. Bye." Midoriya hung up and put his phone back into his pocket. Then Midoriya turned to look at the others, who all had dumbfounded looks on their faces. "What? You just told your mom you were with a friend when you actually got kidnapped by the League of Villains," Debbie replied like it should have been obvious. "Oh," Midoriya said dumbly. "I didn't really think she needed to know." Everyone kept looking at him oddly. "Didn't need to know?" Spinner asked incredulously. "Why wouldn't your mom need to know? You've been kidnapped." Midoriya looked at them with a calm face. "It's not like she could do anything about it, and it's not like you guys are killing her or something. I've been in worse situations than this." "What the fuck?" Debbie muttered. "Midoriya, what do you mean you've been in worse situations?" Magne asked, thinking that being kidnapped by villains would be bad enough to garner a call to a parent. Also, a small part of Magne had felt concerned for the young boy, seeing as he was around Toka's age, who she had grown to be sort of a big sister to. "Well, none of you guys are using your quirks on me or hitting me. All my bones are unbroken. There's no one calling me names or telling me to die. You haven't killed me yet," Midoriya shrugged before drinking some more tea. Midoriya looked at Kurogiri with a smile, and Kurogiri makes really good tea. As Midoriya continued to sip his tea, the others in the bar were looking at each other with a mixture of confused what the fuck faces. Honestly, they were even sure that they had gotten the right kid. This couldn't be a student from UA, because surely UA would not have a student who seemed a little too comfortable in the presence of villains, right? Shigaraki got up and took a seat next to Midoriya at the bar. "Kurogiri, give me a drink." Kurogiri didn't even look up from his rearranging of the glasses. "No." Shigaraki growled, and the thud of his forehead as it hit the bar counter could be heard. Midoriya looked at the villain who was next to him and seemed to be in distress while sipping tea. "I can leave if I'm bothering you guys." That didn't seem to be the right thing to say, as Shigaraki groaned from his place at the bar. Debbie chuckled, walked to the bar, and asked for a drink from the warp villain. Unlike Shigaraki, Kurogiri didn't hesitate to serve the man some alcohol. Shigaraki cursed, but didn't move from his spot at the bar. Kurogiri could see that Midoriya was smiling as the boy sipped his tea. Well, this was Chapter 2 of Tea in a Bar by Tia Blackcharm. Thank you for listening.